Hi, welcome to Just Out of Curiosity, a podcast that talks about sex and sexuality from the lens of a sex-positive brown woman that has a fascination with alternative or non-conventional lifestyles. My name is Shelley D, and I am that sex-positive brown woman. Over the course of several episodes, I'm excited to dive into topics that titillate my interests and make me ask my guests questions, just out of curiosity. And so, my curiosity today leads to reflecting back at this first half of the season. I'll be honest, I had no idea how much work this would be, and it's been quite the journey. Up to this point, I had recorded all of my episodes prior to launching because I'm a control freak like that. But through editing myself, I cringe at the things I say, wished I had followed up or talked more about certain things, or just gotten really annoyed with how bad my audio has been. When I was editing my first episode with John, all I kept hearing is my mouth making these noises. It annoys me so much. I actually shut down the computer through editing maybe the first 10 minutes and said I never wanted to do this again. I was just so embarrassed that I allowed myself to record myself in such a way. And I work in TV. How does that happen? I can tell you everything that I think I did badly, but I've had some great conversations with people about these doubts. And my takeaway from all of that is that I just need to learn to keep reminding myself that this podcast is a journey. It's a journey for me to articulate how I feel about this crazy world we live in, these polarizing views that don't help drive change. What I think helps drive change is to have compassion on either ends of the spectrum, reminding ourselves that the world isn't black and white. I don't think we're meant to live in those types of binaries. If you can see past conventions, you see so much complexity and nuance. And how can you be against nuance? It just makes the world so much more enjoyable. I thank the people that have supported and helped me with this podcast. I also thank all of you listeners for joining me on this journey and allowing me to figure out my voice. I appreciate your messages and comments, and you'll never know how much that means to me. The fact that you go out of your way to respond to something that I've done. You don't have to, but you do. And it puts a huge smile on my face, and it makes my heart so happy. And while my voice is burnt out from this past Pride weekend in Toronto, I couldn't think of a better way to reflect on previous episodes and culminate it with talking about Pride and what it means than with my gay bestie, John de la Cruz. John has been there the entire time being my support, the person to bounce ideas off of, providing me with the framework so I can let my creative juices squirt over these parameters. He's responsible for all the social media we put out, and he's just too damn entertaining for me not to bring back. So let's get into it. Hey.
I'm back, bitch.
Yeah, you are.
Bow. You caught me with my pants down. So hold on, let me just zip up. Hi. I don't know where that came from.
The air just got so much.
Less musky? Sorry, sidebar. So me and my partner Anthony are obsessed with this new term. It's not really new, but whenever we're a little distracted, I'm like, Anthony, what's wrong? Do you have swamp ass?
Oh, he must love that.
Coming in hot.
You know,
swamp
the funny
ass.
thing is, that is not the first time I've ever heard that term, because I used to work somewhere where if I was covering for someone on their lunch break, they definitely had swamp ass.
What the fuck?
And apparently, some of my coworkers, we all talked about it at times.
As in you could smell it, or is there just a stain on the seats?
Let me tell you, there was a smell, and the smell only came from the chair. It only came from the chair. I had to brace myself. I braced myself every time I had to get ready to sit in that chair because. And we called it swamp ass, so it's a thing.
Yeah. No, it's totally a thing. You know what though? I was messing around with this one guy. Way back when, obviously before
Tell
Anthony.
Me more.
And he was like, yeah, I love the smell of men. I love to smell his armpit. I love to smell, his crotch and his balls and his ass. And, he kept on going down the list, but I couldn't stop giggling when he said ass. I'm like, you like to smell ass? I'm like, oh, fuck, right. He's like, trying to get me turned on. And I'm just like, you like to smell ass. What are you into? Swamp ass. Sorry, okay. And I'm going to rein it back in.
Yeah.
Hi, Shelley. So you have me here for a reason.
Yeah, I do. I just realized that I'm halfway through what I anticipate my first season of this podcast to be.
Amazing.
It's crazy. I can't believe how much time flies.
So despite the fact that it feels crazy, like, how do you feel about it?
I don't know. It's really interesting. You're the main person that knows how long I've been planning this.
Mm-hmm.
I've been talking about doing this podcast for probably years now.
Mm-hmm.
But from when did we first start talking about this?
Like, with a serious tone, I'd say since November, December.
Yeah.
Like,
that
soon
was
after your
when-
birthday.
Right. So from November, let's just say November. So that's how many months? November, December, January, February, March, April, May,
Six.
June. 7 months.
6 or
well,
7.
yeah,
Okay.
6 to 7 months. It's been quite the journey.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also really interesting that I actually did something. I didn't just talk about doing something. I
Right.
actually did it.
Yeah.
And that's quite the feat because I never thought that I would actually follow up on talking about it. But also, like, there's that accountability. Like, I've also never really had that accountability to do something and to keep doing it.
Right.
So that's been great, and largely in parts to you.
Hey, give yourself some cred, but yeah, I'm happy to be your co-pilot / cheerleader / person nudging you. But I'm so proud of you. I'm so excited and slightly jealous.
Yeah?
As fellow extrovert, I'm like, I want attention. Give me attention.
Well, here you go.
Thank you very much for giving me this platform. But just to see my friend who is, pushing herself out there, giving herself a platform to kick some ass, share her ideas, have really important, uncomfortable conversations to push the envelope, I couldn't be happier for you. So fucking A.
Thank
Keep
you.
on going, and you still
Okay.
have another half season to go.
I do, but don't ask me what any of those episodes are on because I'm still trying to figure it out.
All good. All good. As they say, sometimes you need to fly the plane while it's building.
Yeah.
Or build the plane while it's flying, and that's okay.
Well, also the really interesting thing is a large part of this is for me. And then when I started, when we were launching, and as like every day for 2 weeks, there was posts and stories, and we were like doing a lot of promotion. There were a lot of people that messaged me that was actually one of the things that I liked the most. And I think a lot of people have been like, what do you want to do with this podcast? What do you want to get out of it? And I've always, in the back of my head, there's always been this sense of community and like talking and starting driving these conversations to get people to think about some things. But like, what more can I do? What more can we all do? What can I talk about? And there's been some great messages that people have come to me. And it's really interesting because I have my own personal Instagram, and then I have this podcast Instagram. And I was having conversations with people that I've known for years,
Yeah.
but now through this like Instagram account, that's not me, but it is me responding.
Right.
And it's some people that I have known for years and just haven't talked to,
Right.
or like we haven't had these conversations, and they're like, I'm really proud of you. Or like they're talking to me about this stuff. And it's just like, this is it's so weird. It's a little surreal to be like, not fly on the wall, but like an out of body experience of like, I'm messaging people that I know, but through a different persona,
Different lens.
a different lens. And
Yeah.
we're having conversations that I haven't had before with them.
Right.
So yeah, it's just the conversations and the topics that have come across with my friends and people about, questions that they now have about sex and sexuality and their lives. And I, that has probably been one of the best things that have come out from it. Outside of like furthering, and I don't want to say this because you're sitting next to me, but furthering our friendship that
Sure.
also has been completely mind-blowing to depend on someone so much.
Yeah. No, I think that it's so cool. And in fact, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So when you first started this pod, one of the things that you articulated is you wanted to start this pod because of conversations and a shift that you've seen in your dad.
Yeah.
Referencing episode 3, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
The fact that because you've been able to have these great conversations, you've seen your dad shift in his perceptions of sexuality and so on and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you wanted to expand these conversations with listeners to help them expand their understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that you're hitting the mark, or do you feel that impact yet, or?
I would love to think that I am feeling the impact. I think that because this is so, we're starting off so small that it might not have the scope and the brevity of like people listening in to really answer that question in its fullest.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just really like the amount of times I've heard someone say, I can never talk to my dad about this stuff. And then it makes me feel really privileged. And I know that I have that privilege, but it makes me feel really privileged to have a relationship with my father where I can talk about stuff like that with. And also he's willing to learn and willing to see things and have these conversations with me. He very well knows, having me as his daughter, that if he says anything that's unfeminist or unqueer or not queer friendly, like he'll look at me as if he's bracing himself for some kind of fire breathing Shelley remark on him.
Yeah. You've trained him well.
Yeah, I definitely have.
Should be very proud of that. I feel like I also share a bit of privilege being able to talk to my dad about sex in a certain way, which is I know not very common with most people. My dad's a very sexual person who likes to provoke and say like really nasty stuff.
Yes.
Just to give you some context, you may have heard the story before.
I can't see it at all in you.
So like, just to give people who are listening a context of who Robert Dela Cruz, my dad, is. So like, one time I'm at home and my dad's like, hey, Jonathan, when you pull your dick out of Anthony's butt, is it covered in shit? So that's my dad. So unlike your dad, however, while he can say some really nasty stuff, aka what I just shared, he's not one to, debate or listen or brace for impact because, his way is his way, right? So, obviously the experiences with each of our respective dads differ, but
well, it's also really interesting though, because when that episode with my dad came out, I was very uncertain if that episode was going to happen or when it was going to happen, because I prefaced this in the episode, but me and my dad butt heads a lot.
Sure.
And it was getting to the point where like, I just don't know if I want to have this conversation with him, because if he gets too defensive and his back gets up against the wall, is he going to start fighting with me? Is he going to start lashing out, or is he actually going to try to allow this conducive behavior or conversation to exist? And I sat on it. I think you also told me that I should do it because I was like, I don't want to do this. I can't handle this. But there's parts of him that I allowed for the nicer side of my dad to show up, and I really gave him a space to feel comfortable talking about it, because if I ever were to bring him back, I think I would, ask more questions, because I didn't question him that much. I didn't fight back on some of the things that he said, because as much as it's so lovely hearing him now talk about how he wanted to incorporate sex education from school with me and really have these conversations with me, at the same time, I was never allowed to go to the school dances because God forbid I touch a boy, and I was the only, at one point, my father was the only person that denied me from going to the school dance. And it was getting really awkward because the teachers were like, I think the teacher, not in so many ways to make me feel guilty, but was just like, we have to keep a teacher around just for you.
Oh boy.
And they're like, is there any way that your dad can come around to it? I was just like, have you met my dad? I can't even no. If he says no, he says no. But there were some times where it was just like, I was really overprotected by my father. And, so it's great. It's great that he tried really hard with me in some ways, but in some other ways I felt like I was a lone wolf by myself trying to figure this stuff out, because my parents or my father were a little bit more protective than everyone else around me, which is also the problem with being a brown child in a largely white or non-brown school. I don't know if you ever had any of those.
No, my parents were very hands-off. They were like, all right, Jonathan, just go to school and make sure you bring back some good grades.
Did you ever sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
But did you ever have any moments where you could see that clash between what was happening in school, like North American culture, and then like it was different than what you had as like Filipino in your household type? Like, did you ever notice any clashes or inconsistencies?
Yeah, of course. Though, my like, as I was kind of alluding to, my dad's really different and not one to really push Filipino culture in that respect. So he was very like hands off. But what I do want to mention though is that as someone who was listening in the conversation, a very really open, like it was from someone who wasn't in the conversation, it was very surreal to sit in and listen into a very intimate interesting conversation between you and your dad. And one, I think that your dad should get so much credit for being willing to have that conversation. Two, I think as much as you were just kind of describing, you know, the challenges of having a very oppressive parent who's like really into your shit, it's a double-edged sword. So sure, there was some crappy stuff, but as you pointed out, it wasn't very clear in your memory the fact that he really advocated for that science class piece. That was really fucking cool.
It was. I
loved hearing about that.
So did I.
Yeah.
I feel like I probably remembered parts of that, but like not to the extent of when he was telling me. And as embarrassing as that probably was, maybe I didn't remember because I was so embarrassed that he went and reamed out the teacher. But like looking back at it, I was like, oh, fuck yeah. Like, thanks, Dad.
He's
like,
advocating for you as a feminist,
he didn't
really.
have to, He didn't have to at all. And then there he was being like, you didn't let my daughter experiment.
Yeah.
She had to take notes.
That's bullshit.
And even the fact, I guess it was because I was really upset coming home. I can see that because I had a conversation with my mom and my dad too. And my mom was just like, yeah, Shelly, you were really upset about it.
Okay.
So yeah, it is really nice. Like you said, a double-edged sword, which sucked in some ways, but I think really benefited me in the end.
Yeah. There was another part that you were talking about just earlier about crafting the podcast to ensure that your dad came across in a really nice way. So I do have to say though, Shelly, so like the tone of the conversation, again, as an outsider, maybe this is interesting feedback for you, but like the tone of the conversation was very like equal and like lovely, back and forth. And then there's like a pivot, like a very distinct pivot in the conversation where you had an opportunity to tell your dad, dare I say, lecture dad on what male privilege is, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you caught yourself.
Yes, no, I did.
So, but the way that it was framed, your dad's like, yes, Shelly, I do understand what male privilege is, and I can understand where you're coming from, which was really, really lovely.
Well, when we were talking about it beforehand, and I was talking about what patriarchal society is like and how that doesn't benefit me at times, he got very defensive,
right?
And he just was like, that doesn't exist in my world. And I had all these women bosses where I work. You know, I'm the patriarch of this family and I don't exclude women. And I was just like, you know, this isn't about you specifically. It's about like the society at large. Okay, I will learn from this and I will not talk to my dad about ideologies because that's just not going to fly.
Yeah.
But it just seemed at that point in that conversation that like he was, the way we were speaking about trans people, that like how he was talking, if he could understand from that same perspective what it meant for me as a woman in a patriarchal society or for women in patriarchal societies, like it felt like it just matched. And I was just like, let me see if I can do this. Oh my God, fingers crossed.
Leap of faith.
It worked. And it was just like, okay, great. I hope that he retains that information and he can see it. Also, he's going to Pride on Sunday.
Yes. So exciting. Oh my God. And it's his first Pride too, isn't it?
It's his first Pride, yes.
Woo.
So also, other big news in having a podcast is that I have a boyfriend now.
What?
I know. Somehow I have a boyfriend that's very okay with this whole podcast thing and me and what that means. But he heard the episode and was just like, Shelly, I'll take your dad to Pride. And he's like, I'll be that buffer. I'll be that baby step that he might need. And I was just like, that is actually the sweetest thing. I've only known you for 1.5 months and you're willing to do that for me already. And I thought that was super cute. And then I asked my dad and my mom and they're both like, well, if Jesse will go, why not us? And I was like, this is actually so cute.
So your mom's coming too?
My mom will be there too. And I'm also walking in the parade.
That's so great. That I'm so over the moon. Like all of this progress, all this excitement with your parents coming together to support you, to support Pride. It's phenomenal.
I'm pretty sure my mom will be wearing sunglasses looking for the naked men in the parade. Sorry, Mom.
I'm going to say something controversial about Pride.
Okay.
Actually, the parades particularly. I feel like the Pride parades are designed specifically for straight people. So like for them to feel good.
Tell me more.
So dare I say there is an element, not a complete element, but there is an element of the Pride Parade that is performative, that makes people feel like, okay, this is, or particularly straight people, corporations, okay? I know I'm dipping into this. I don't know, people who want to support, like allies, a space for allies to be really, really supportive of the community, of challenges. But for queer spaces where queer people want to be out and proud, they exist elsewhere. Maybe people have said the trans parade, the Dyke March.
Yeah.
That's where grassroots political beliefs are really, really voiced.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I also feel, I mean, maybe this is for the better, but there's less attention I find that is put towards the Dyke March and the Trans March.
Less
or
corporate
trans
dollars.
pride. Yeah, there's that. And I know, even looking at the route of it all, it's a shorter route.
Right.
But a part of me then, talking about the corporatization and just the fact that it's performative, is it better than that, the Dyke March and the Trans March are smaller because it lends to queer people being together with other queer people? Like it feels more community based.
Right.
Is that a bad thing to say?
No, not at all. I think that when you look at the main Pride Parade, which, has its benefits and negative pieces, right? It drives costs. Like you cannot have a big, massive Pride Parade without, dare I say, I think that it's been proven that you cannot have a big Pride Parade, Pride celebrations without corporate sponsors, right? So it's your question about, is it a good thing if it's small? Absolutely. I'd say so. If you want to maintain that grassroots, small, politically driven, non-corporate space that pushes for the queer agenda, it needs to be grassroots. It needs to not be dictated by corporate dollars.
Yeah, it's...
Grr. Sorry, I hear myself. I'm like, oh my gosh. Who invited the Marxists?
So powerful you are, John. I also wonder, though, the Dyke March and the Pride Parade, not the Pride March, also not having as much corporate dollars. Like, why? Because, I mean, as much as we want the grassroots part of it all, I like the fact that it's small because it's grassroots, but at the same time, it feels sad that those two in particular are smaller, and I wonder...
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Why they're smaller. Are they smaller because it's not like the gay pride part of it all, and I think sometimes that kind of encapsulates everything. Or I just don't know if I'm looking too much into it.
No, I think there's a double-edged sword to being small and sure they're not getting the corporate dollars, sure they're not getting as much attention, but again they're getting their message across. They're creating space. They're advocating for the rest of the community. I just hope that they're getting the impact that they seek.
Yes. Yeah, I think, that ultimately is what I'm also wondering. It's curious, though, because there is this notion of, the corporatization of pride and companies that are have floats and are walking in the parade and they're, the reasons as to why they're doing it. Is it just performative? Do they actually want to make an impact? Do they have queer people that are employees of them? But, what about... We don't know where half of these corporations, what their intentions are with being Pride. And what if someone like Chick-fil-A was like, I doubt this will actually happen, but
Extreme
what
case,
if Chick-fil-A, and us knowing everything about Chick-fil-A, what if they decided that they wanted to have a float in the parade because they had queer employees that, they want to empower or they want to give a space to?
Right.
And for those that don't know anything about Chick-fil-A and why this might be an issue is, I think it was 5 years ago, depending. At some point, Chick-fil-A in the States, said that they were a very Christian organization. They gave Sundays off to their employees, but they part of their philanthropic. Wow. Okay. Part of their philanthropic views was that they would give money to other Christian organizations, which also involved conversion therapy and other pro-Christian family value type organizations, which, is a step back
Right.
for the queer community in general. So if you had a problematic or somewhat problematic company saying we want to be in the parade, what do you do with that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. First of all, great explanation on Chick-fil-A. I know that you were kind of like put it on the spot and I'm like, okay, let me do my best to explain this. No, great job. So let me just rephrase
Yes,
or
please
reframe what
do.
you're saying. I think what you're getting at is what do we do with hypocritical corporate sponsorship, right? So like Chick-fil-A obviously is not like a corporate sponsor for obvious reasons, but like there are documented organizations or corporate organizations that will sponsor Pride, but also fund money to very extreme right organizations that are
Yes.
anti-queer, right? What do we do with that? No, it's a great question. I'm not entirely sure how I want to answer this, but I will say this. I would rather take a hypocritical corporate dollar than a full out anti-corporate corporation, right? So like, so it kind of is akin to, and this is a bit of a tangent, but I will bring it
Yeah.
back. It is akin to what do we do with queer spaces and allies or non-queer people coming into gay bars and just like taking up space,
Yeah.
right? So like my stance is let them in, make sure that they're paying their drinks at the bar, make sure that they're paying drinks, tipping the queens.
Yes.
You know, sure they're taking away from queer spaces, but if they're dropping their dollar, I'm a bit of a capitalist in that sense, right? If you're paying money and you're supporting a queer business,
Yes.
absolutely.
You are supporting queer companies. Yeah.
Right. So analogous, I hope I'm saying that right, or parallel to that. So for corporate sponsorship, so long as these corporations and their dollars aren't dictating how queer communities are governing themselves, how they are, I don't know, dictating how they want to move forward with their social agenda, I think it's fine if they are doing some backward dollars. I would obviously prefer for like a full out, we are like 1,000% LGBT friendly. I would rather take that dollar than, a Chick-fil-A.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen,
I hope I don't get hate for that.
But I like, who are we to actually know the answers to these things? I think it's just, it's something to question because especially with the climate that we're in, there is this notion of like, who's actually how performative is all this action? Like,
Right.
is it just all lip service? Are they actually like putting their dollars towards something? Is this just a way for people to buy into their products?
Right.
Because I was also, I did just like, I Googled corporatization of Pride and there was an article that I came across. Hold on, and they were talking about some of the hypocritical backings of people in Pride in the parade. And it is also just like, we only know this information. There's probably lots of stuff that we don't know that companies
course.
don't do. I don't know if I can find this now, but it was something like, let's just say Adidas is a huge sponsor for Pride, but their large warehouses and a lot of where their shoes are made is in China, which
Right.
is very anti-LGBTQ. So, what do you like? It's this whole chicken and egg kind of concept, I guess.
Right.
But like, what is it okay? Like, what do we do with the stuff that we don't know? How do we try and move forward? Is it too much? Is it too hypocritical? And maybe that's where my question about Chick-fil-A came from, is like reading some of these hypocrisies of big companies and not really knowing where they put their money. What then happens when you do have some kind of company like outside of Chick-fil-A? How far is too far? At what
Right.
point do you have everyone, in a parade?
Right. Absolutely. It's a really good question. And if I could just like try my best to break this down, like for me as a individual who benefits from certain privileges, sure, I'm a cis gay man who's also a POC, right? Like I have certain privileges. I also have some systematic barriers in front of me, right?
Yeah.
I am so grateful, and I know I'm repeating myself from our first podcast.
Oh yeah, you are.
But as a result of waves that people have made prior to me, so my elder gays who were out on the streets in the 80s protesting,
Yeah.
building awareness, fighting the government for gay marriage, which was only legislated, like back in the early 2000s here in Canada. We as a queer community and our allies, hand in hand, stand on their shoulders, right? And it's so easy to have these rights pulled back.
Yeah.
So I am proud of where we are as a society. I am proud of who I am. I am proud of the fact that I could go to work and be a flaming faggot, you know? And I am lauded for it. And I'm so grateful for my employers and my colleagues who celebrate who I am.
Yeah.
And I really, really hope that this gratitude and this recognition of where we are as a society is amplified through these celebrations of Pride, right? And hopefully I can be an ally and an advocate for those who can't do this in China, in other places where it is illegal.
Fair. Yeah,
right?
no, that makes sense. And I have been in the South Korean Pride Parade, and it is a much smaller, like it is just a circle road, and maybe, I don't even know. Like I would say 1/20th of the people that go to this parade. And I think even 1/20th is a little bit too much. Although it's probably changed in the amount of years I've left Korea. But I guess it does make me, like, there is a sense of pride when I'm in Toronto's Pride. And I haven't really truthfully been to very many other countries' prides. But it's hard to know where you draw that line. And sometimes it's just like, fuck yeah. Like, recognize the fact that queer people exist. And yeah, we let our freak flags fly. And if everyone wants to get in on it, cool. I do recognize that there's probably like the underbelly of pride that many other people don't know about.
Yeah.
That is also largely celebrated as well. I would love also the grassroots part of it all to stay alive as well. It's not just a party.
Right. It's absolutely not. And if I could say another thing about Pride.
Yeah, please.
Reiterating something that Bosco,
Yes.
a drag queen from season 14, RuPaul's Drag Race. Shut up, Bosco. Ow! I'm going to botch what she has said, but I'll do my best. So she recognized that Pride, the queer community, pre-corporatization, family friendly, had an aspect of the community that was sex-oriented, that was sex positive. The kink community, right? The naked people that your mom is going to be watching for, right? These people were part of the community and still are part of the community that fucking fought, that fought for like medical care, for HIV AIDS treatment, right? They were in the trenches with us, right? And I think it is really important for them to continue to be recognized, or else it'd be a complete disservice to where we were in the past. And this is a shout out to like younger LGBTQ, 2S, AA, LMNOP people of our community. You need to know your history. And not to say that I know all the queer history as well, right? But again, I reiterate this point, like we owe a debt of thanks and a debt of gratitude to those who came before us, right? Because
I agree.
We wouldn't be where we are here in 2022 if it wasn't for people who fought. Actually, fun fact that I just found out, the reason that initially when we were calling ourselves LGBT, the reason that L was put first to represent the lesbians is a debt of thanks for all the lesbian nurses who treated queer men who were dying in hospitals of HIV AIDS.
Oh.
Because no one else would want to take care of them. So it was the lesbian nurses that took care of them.
Of course.
So, shout out to our lesbian nurses.
Yes.
You know who you are. Love you.
There's so much of history that even I don't know a whole lot.
I need to learn more.
And it's so easy to, especially like today, it's you don't really know that much as much as all the the information is out there on the interwebs. And I feel so old for saying interwebs, but it's all there, but it's still so hard to access because people don't want to access that. It's like going on TikTok when TikTok first started and being told of all these life hacks. Like today I learned that you can do this, and it's just like, I'm pretty sure I always knew that. You're only learning this now because TikTok told you.
Yeah, honestly.
And so like it's easy to get more complacent with knowing history or just knowing about life around you when you have social media just telling you all these random things.
Right.
And then you kind of get kerfuffled with like celebrities and other things that are happening. You don't really know where the background history of all that is. And to be fair, like there's still a lot of stuff that I don't know. The Stonewall riots and I'm still learning about what happened pre-Stonewall riots that led to those riots.
It's a good question. Actually, I'm going to interrupt. Do you know that we had our own Stonewall riots here in Canada?
Where?
So in 1980, there was, I'm going to botch this, but there was some type of police raid with a couple of bathhouses in the 1980s, like early 1980s.
In Toronto?
Here in Toronto.
Okay.
And Margaret Atwood was part of the protests after the
yeah.
fact. Fucking Margaret.
I know.
And yeah, no, it was just very much like, how dare the police break up, gay men just doing what they want to do. And yeah, it was freaking great that, the gay community rallied around this injustice of like the cops just smacking it down just because they don't like gays, cavorting and having a good time.
So this happened in Toronto. This happened in New York. This must have happened in other places. It's really telling that it was always like this. Or
homophobia existed, right?
Yeah,
And
or just even how people viewed other people. Like there was always this majority, and there were always the same types of majority of people, and you had similar kind of Stonewall riots happening. It just goes to show you that like it's not a unique situation to just ourselves.
No, not at all. And again, that reinforces the fact that we need to continue to move the needle forward to ensure that, sure, we have all these wonderful things in Canada, but like, what about other communities outside of Canada? Or even in Canada, there's still lots of rights that need to be protected and fought for our trans siblings, right? So.
Oh, and I mean, we would, yes, I do want like non-binary, gender non-conforming trans people to be included in everyday life. But it's even just my rights as a woman sometimes are questioned. Like we're still living, it's 2022, and I don't even know if I were to go to some states in America, if I would have proper health care. Or, just reading about stuff like that. Like, it's just like even some of our most basic rights are being taken away.
Right.
And when I was reading about like the popular opinion of the Supreme Court in the States, and they're going to probably overturn Roe v. Wade, which is women's right to abortion. But then they were even talking about like just when, not too long ago, when they approved of same-sex marriage, a lot of their popular opinion went down. And it's only going down by some other people now because of abortion. But it's just so interesting. Like we have these rights, but they can go away so quickly.
Right.
And especially because in today's temperament, it's us versus them. It's right versus left. And there's no middle ground anymore. It's either you're on our side or you're not. And we're just going to take away your rights if you can't. And that's really scary.
It really is. It really is. And again, I'll say it again. That's why for me as a queer gay man. Sorry, that's redundant. Pride's so important, right? To ensure that, the majority that's outside of the LGBTQ2S community is aware that we're here. I'm not going to go down that route, but we're queer, we're here, and we're going to continue to be here. Respect and worship us.
I just hit that mic. Just slightly on that note, it made me very happy when it happened. But there was after Leah Thomas and the NCAA swimming championships and people just losing their minds over the fact that a trans athlete won. There were a number of anti-trans bills for kids coming out, and a lot of them were getting passed in the Republican states. But there were 2 Republican states that vetoed the bill, which made my heart so happy because they didn't have to, but they recognized, and I can only talk about the Utah one because I really don't remember for the life of me who the other state was, but the senator of Utah vetoed that bill because he recognized that there weren't that many trans kids. He actually counted how many trans kids there were in his state, and there might have been 4. And he was just like, I don't see why I should allow a bill to pass if I'm only calling out to those 4 trans kids. But when I look at the mental health state of these kids and the bullying and suicides and just, it's not easy for these kids. Why am I going to make it worse for them? And he's like, of those 4, there's only 1 competing in sports. So he's like, this isn't an issue right now. And I don't want to make it an issue because ultimately at the end of the day, we have to look out for them and their well-being and their safety because that actually is not happening. And when all these other Republican states said yes, just automatically said yes because they were like, oh my God, our kids are being held up against these ridiculous standards. I don't want to put our kids through this. These 2 Republican senators said no. And that is what we also need more of as well. So like thankfully for pride, but also thankfully for people using their rational, their brains for proper reasons, and not just like in this hyper sensitized world where we just have to go with what everyone else is doing. It was lovely to see. It's sad that it's that small, but it was still nice to see.
Yeah, I can't say anything, but I agree with you and express my gratitude for allies. Not to say that, just because they do one thing that's very reasonable, that they're like a queer ally.
Yeah,
and I absolve them of all the other like Republican decisions they've made, but whatever.
It's a small step.
Context,
it's a small step, especially when it comes to kids and just that whole thing. Anyways, well, I mean, if we're going to talk about, like this journey of the podcast, I mean, I also did my episode with Diana on trans and like gender identities. And I'm going to be honest, that was probably my favorite conversation that I've had thus far.
So our conversation, it wasn't your favorite. Okay. I see how it is. Obviously I'm fucking with you. Absolutely. You know what? That conversation. So like at this point, we've only published the first one.
Yes.
But by the time our listeners listen to this, the second one will be out. But can I just share my favorite moments of the conversation?
Please do.
The two parts that really struck me. So I like to think that I'm pretty like up and up with trans issues. I've gone to a one-on-one trans education training for 3 hours, this and that. So I'm like so proud of myself. But obviously, there's more to knowing about trans issues than just going to a training session. No, Diana fucking was so vulnerable and honest. And she said two things that really like struck me. One, the crying piece. So just to remind you and people listening. So she talked about how when she was identifying as a man before her transition, she talked about how tears just, like she thought that
it hurt to cry.
It hurt to cry. She figured that it was toxic masculinity that was preventing her from crying. But then once she had her inhibitor, her T inhibitors in, and
after hormone replacement therapy, and she like depleted the testosterone and introduced the estrogen.
It just comes naturally. Should watch what was that show?
Not Bridgerton, Downton Abbey.
Downton Abbey, and it just waterworks, and it was very cathartic, and it felt awesome. Lean in, I think she said about crying, and
I never thought about that either, because I always used to think that it's men and it's toxic masculinity that men can't feel their emotions and cry and stuff like that. And it was just like, why is it that we always think women are more fragile for crying? And I never really thought that maybe it was hormones. I found that super insightful too when she told me that.
And then conversely, she referred to one of her trans masculine friends, peers, who missed their tears, which I thought was really fascinating. Because like, if that is the case, then maybe it kind of like demonstrates that toxic masculinity isn't an actually like maybe a smaller piece to why men
it's
don't cry.
Hormones play a big part as to why we are the way we are, and I never really considered that with the emotion part. But the funny thing is, and I think this is where the maybe the toxic side of masculinity, whatever it is just how we view crying and being emotional as negative and weak. And sometimes it's just very necessary. Like 100%. A good, and this is something, it's really interesting. I think because I grew up around men my entire life, and I've always just like leaned in more to my masculine tendencies or my masculine energy, or however you want to refer to it as. I never cried, and I always found weakness with crying, and I never liked being around people that cried. I didn't know how to handle it. And it wasn't until at some point I grew up a little bit, and I started embracing or being very okay with my femininity. And I now feel like constantly I need a good cry. It just releases all these emotions, and I feel so much better because you just allowed yourself to just be so vulnerable and get it out of you, and then I can go on. But sometimes I feel like if I don't have a cry or have that emotional release, I'm so pent up with frustration.
Right. So when was the last time you had a good cry? If I may ask. You don't have to answer
a good
that.
cry has been, it's been a while. I feel like I have been the happiest I've ever been in so long, and I think that's partly because I'm in a relationship.
Hey, you hear that, Jesse?
That I haven't really cried. I have shed tears over like not knowing how to navigate it because let me tell you, being in a relationship for the first time in a really long time, I just have no idea how to navigate stuff. And so sometimes I get like really in my head about it and I'll like a tear or two will come down, but a good cry hasn't happened in a while. Also, this whole podcast thing has kept me so busy that I haven't had the ability to. It's bound to happen. It's bound to happen.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I can't answer that question, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of this conversation.
No, not at all. Not at all.
When was the last time you cried? Do you cry? I don't even know this.
Well, I could tell you the last time I cried, but it was just more like overwhelming. I was just overwhelmed by a lot of like really cool imagery. So I was watching Everything Everywhere All at Once. I cannot recommend this movie enough because it's just fucking brilliant. So it stars Michelle Yeoh.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm blanking on everyone else's names, but it's, Jamie Lee Curtis is in it. The Roundhouse from Indiana Jones, who's since grown up into this really cool...
Is that a superhero movie?
No, not at all. It's not an MCU movie.
Michelle... But no, it's not an MCU movie, but I heard it's a superhero... Because I heard it... Okay,
No. So it, like, the whole multiverse thing is a theme, but it is not like a heavy, it doesn't like underline the whole thing. Anyways, I was laughing one second and then I'm bawling my eyes out another. So like I'm still on the high, like there's like highs and lows within like a second, and it's fucking brilliant. But what you were describing though, like having a good cry and just like letting it all fucking out, I don't think I experienced that because I was reacting to what I was seeing.
Right.
I wasn't reacting to what's like percolating inside.
Yeah.
So the most equivalent thing that I could talk about was maybe about 3 or 4 weeks ago. We're going to get into therapy here.
Oh, yay. I love therapy.
But long story short, so like I've had this like nagging feeling at the back of my head that I didn't want to address. So I'm not a very anxious person. I'm pretty much like, oh, the world's ending, but I'm like, silver lining. We got this. I've been telling my partner, there's so much that's out of our control in our circle of influence. They're kind of like waves crashing on a boat. You and me, we are in this boat and we're just going to navigate with our paddle.
Yeah.
Like I'm that guy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you are.
With that said, 4 weeks ago, there's this like nagging, like existential angst that was telling me, you've peaked and now it's time for you to just wait and die. And I was like, I know, right? Super dark, but I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what else I'm gonna do. I have nothing else to look forward to, right? So like this like nagging, like, all right, do you have nothing else to live for? So,
oh my God.
You've peaked, John, you've peaked. So that was nagging me, right? So like Anthony was kind of picking up on this like weird vibe.
This was about 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, maybe you've picked up on it too. I don't know. But, as an extrovert, I could put on a good show, blah, blah, blah. But so like me and Anthony were having this lovely evening. Maybe speak of the devil, is that Anthony?
Yeah, he's totally messaging. Thanks, computer, for not being mute.
All good. It's like the universe, like his ears are burning and he's like, yeah, I should talk to Shelly. But so like me and Anthony are having this like lovely dinner Saturday night on our balcony. The moon's rising. But I'm feeling like garbage, and I turn to my partner, and I'm just like, Anth, I need to talk to you about this like thing that's hanging over me. And then I spilt my guts, and kind of like a good cry, I felt fucking great afterwards.
Yeah.
The following day, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make plans. I do have lots to look forward towards, right?
Yeah, there is something so nice, even if it's just not even a good cry. It's just releasing whatever it is. Like there's always that nagging thing in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
And you don't want to talk about it because you're so scared of talking about it. But the minute you do, it's your brain stops nagging you, which I think is the most ultimate reason to celebrate.
Yeah.
But then it's just like this like weight has been lifted off of you. And then you're like, yeah, okay, I can go on my way. Because I feel like we also think that everything is so bad and so draining and so toxic. And then when you talk about it, you realize it's not that bad.
Oh, totally.
And then that ultimately, to me, is some of the reasons why I feel so much better. I can get real down and I can ruminate and I can have depression. And I think that the world is going to hate me. And then I talk about it with someone and they're like, Shelly, that's not even that bad. Or they'll tell me their problem and it's way worse than mine. And I'm like, okay, I feel great. Not to say anything bad about the other person, but like, it's okay, great. I get it. This is just, my brain wants to tell me that I'm the worst person in the world right now. And that's not actually the truth.
Not actually the truth.
And sometimes it's just that release that makes you feel so much better.
Right.
I also, on a side note, that's probably the reason why there's so much gun violence in the States.
Oh? Mental health?
I remember thinking this when there was the shootings with the guy in the Asian massage parlors.
Oh, geez.
And I just remember thinking to myself, yes.
Yeah, that was in Atlanta.
That was Atlanta. There's so many. I just remember thinking to myself, I'm like, I don't see any female gun shooters. Why is that? And I'm not trying to make this like a woman versus man thing, but I do think it's a large part that they don't know how to release their anger. And so the best thing that they can do is, the easiest thing that they can do is buy a gun, and they get their 50 minutes of fame, maybe go live on Twitch or Discord and like have like some kind of live streaming event.
Right.
And it's just their way of releasing this pent up aggression.
Right.
And instead it's not healthy. And I think that it's so toxic and they're taught so hard not to say anything that that's the only way they know how to release it. And I think that's the only reason why, well, amongst other things, it's the reason why it's just so rampant right now, gun violence.
Right. I think that you really underlined the need to expand and normalize discussion of mental health among men.
Yes.
To really disarm.
Yeah.
And I mean that in many, many different ways. Really disarm men from taking that step towards violence by talking about what the heck is going on in their head.
Yeah.
Why do they feel the way that they do? Why are they so fucking angry?
I don't understand why it's so hard for them to do that, though. Like, I mean, I do understand why, like, we tell people largely, but also men, that they shouldn't talk about this stuff, and it's too feminine and it's too weak to talk about your feelings. But, like, it boggles my mind because it doesn't. It actually will just make you more of a nuanced person. Like, you know, there's more, people will see you differently if you actually say that you're not okay at times.
Right. If you could indulge a little rant.
Yeah.
I think, at the risk of sounding Pollyanna, I think it all comes down to compassion. So I think that while a lot of hate comes from fear of not understanding why other people that they don't know are the way they are, if they can just look at the unknown, look at things that scare them with a veil of compassion rather than fear, they would be more inclined to reach across that void of fear to really understand them better, right? So, like, dare I say, I'm trying to be compassionate towards, like, these gunmen. Why are they so? The person who killed those victims, right? Not that I'm excusing his fucking actions, right? But, like, why did he do it? Like, why is he so angry? Why is he so angry at these women? Just asking that question would have spared their lives.
Yeah, it's also when I look back at where incel came from.
Oh.
Incel, involuntary celibacy, came. It started from a woman in Montreal.
A woman.
Yes, and she.
I didn't see that coming.
She, well, because at the heart of it, it makes sense. This has been a while since I came across the story, but from my recollection is that she was bi-curious, or, you know, she was in school trying to find a partner and just wasn't getting anywhere. And so she decided to start a support group of people that were in the same kind of situation.
Okay.
And it's just a way for, like, people to talk to each other, help each other out. You know, like, you know, dating is not easy. You're in university, hormones are all over the place. You can get upset real fast. There's all these extra things about studying and all this other stuff. So it was this support group, and it was there were men and women all over. And at some point she stopped because she either got a teaching job or graduated, and she left. And then she got a message a couple years later saying that her group, as innocent as that started off, then devolved into men taking it over and using it as they used it as an outpost of like being upset that they were trying to hit on women and women were saying no. And then it just completely devolved into where it is now, where it's just like they can't even handle the rejection. And so instead of handling the rejection and understanding why they're being rejected, it's let's get angry at the people that reject me. And then it became this like hate group of like, we're gonna hate the Beckys, the Karens, or like the
Barbies, the
Barbies,
Kens.
yes, the hot women that we hit on that say no to us. How dare they? And the men that they hook up with, how dare they? It's not fair to me. And I feel like when it comes to that gun violence, it's very similar in that mentality of thinking. It's the world is out to get me. No one wants to let me be me because of whatever reason, and so they take out their anger on these other people. But like, we all live that world. We all know what it's like to be rejected. Yep. And it's funny because for me as a woman, when a man doesn't, when I try to say no to a man, sometimes the rejection that I get is, well, you're a fat cow who wants to have sex with you anyway. You're a dirty, disgusting bitch that has sex with all these people. Who wants to have sex with you? And I'm like, literally, you just wanted to have sex with me before I said no to you. But you couldn't handle that rejection. I get rejection all the time, right? Like, we all get it. It's how you manage to handle that rejection. And I think with those men, especially with gun violence, they don't know how to handle it at all. And I don't know what kind of life they live in their household. I'm pretty sure their parenting in that household that they live in is pretty damn toxic to begin with. Yeah. But I think that also adds on to that anger, and they don't know how to healthily release themselves of that pent-up aggression, whether or not it's boxing. Like, why don't you like go sign up for some MMA? Like that, like to me, kickboxing and boxing is like the ultimate form of releasing pent-up aggression. Yeah. But like if they just found another form of it, then they could learn that it doesn't have to be so extreme.
Right. Hearing that just reminds me of a lesson that seems to be reinforced all the time. We all have egos. We all are sensitive, but some people are more self-aware and have a thicker skin. Yeah. Shout out to Anthony. Anthony is like one of the thickest skinned people who has very little ego about most things. Right. And I say most, not all. Yeah. But most.
We're not perfect.
I was raised to be a little bit more sensitive.
Yeah.
I do have a thinner skin, but I'm still relatively cognizant of
thin skin.
I think I do.
You don't show it then.
Really? Do you? Well, maybe because Anthony, like, he knows how to dig the jabs because, like, he grew up with, like, brothers who, like, jab at each other. So he feels like he could do that to me, too. And I'm just like, can you not, Anthony? That's so rude. Ugh. He actually continues to pick at me just so he could get those reactions from me. Mm-hmm. Anyways, sorry, just so that I could finish my point. So that, and then there are people who just are so thin-skinned and so irrational that like, they feel like everyone's out to get them, or there's like the left is out to get them. Yes. Take my guns. Make me conform and be like non-binary when I'm a man with a penis. You know, like
Black lives matter. All lives matter. It's that.
Yeah, like I'm being victimized by the left, right? Like. I understand that they feel victimized and, they have, an ego that's being attacked. So I am trying to be compassionate to a certain degree, but like when it's, baseless and like illogical, it's hard to maintain that compassion.
Yeah. I do attribute it, or I do think a lot of it is attributable to the fact of like, this is just a lifestyle that has been really dug into some people for decades and centuries, right? And it's even like, I can really only use the States as my marker for it, but like you'll have it's slavery and people, slavery sympathizers, like there's.
Sorry, is that a thing currently? Well, contemporary?
I don't know if it is contemporary. And I think it's more just people that owned plantations that didn't want to admit how bad it was, that they spun it in a way that's like, oh, we gave Black people a job and we taught them English and we allowed them to come here and integrate into society first. And that was like their way of excusing their behavior. Or if they were telling their kids, in a way that didn't make them look bad, that like, it's just all of this kind of mentality has been put into some of these families for so long that they don't know how to see past it.
Yeah. I have a solution for all of this.
What
Are you
is
ready for it? Rub clits.
Scissoring.
And I say that like very facetiously and like flippantly, but there's actually a bit of like science to this.
So good.
I'm going to say it again. All that we need to do to solve the world's problems is to rub clits. Okay. And I say this because okay, so like I'm gonna try my best to do justice to this. So scientists or zoologists, anthropologists have observed bonobo chimpanzees, so a subset of chimpanzees, are so like all these monkeys, simians are social creatures just like humans, right? Chimpanzees, so the non-bonobos are patriarchal, just like our society.
Right.
And there's often a lot of violence between the patriarchs, these like fighting alpha males who are trying to protect and dominate over other warring tribes, right?
Yeah.
Right? So there is no clit rubbing happening in this world, right? However, when you look at bonobos, so these anthropologists would watch these bonobos resolve conflict by rubbing clits. So contrary to chimpanzees, bonobo chimpanzees are matriarchal. Matriarchal, thank you, right? So like whenever there's conflict between like warring things, the lead female, alpha females would come together and rub clits.
Fuck yes.
They would release tension and steam. So, sorry, I could go on a tangent with this. Maybe I will go on this tangent, but long story short, if we had more female fucking leaders pushing the agenda, like shedding off all this like patriarchal bullshit of like, I have a bigger dick with you with more weapons, more guns, all my toxic masculinity. And if they just like whipped out their giant clits and rubbed up of each other, release that steam and say, hey, you know what? I look at you eye to eye with compassion. I see that we have differences, but if we just rub clits for another 5 minutes, we will find, common ground. I don't know about you, but I want to live in that world.
I want to live in that world as someone who has a clit. And I'm going to tell you, it feels great.
No doubt. Let me ask you, because I think the intention of this conversation was to do more reflections on the pod itself. Obviously, we went on a wild tangent, which I enjoyed. But do you want to talk about like lessons learned as a podcaster?
Yeah. Yeah, we can talk about the evolution.
So, Shelley, given, the fact that you have X amount of... given the fact that you have like a X amount of pods under your belt now, so like, what do you think you've learned so far?
Oh, what have I learned? I've learned that audio is essential. And oh my God, audio is so hard to do right. I also never knew that I did this, but I make these and I hate those sounds, and I didn't even realize I was doing it. It's so apparent and prevalent in my episode with you because I did not realize I was doing it. And then I edit my own episode, so I was listening to it, and I actually I smoked a joint. I was like, that's going to focus me. I'm going to work on this episode. And all I could hear was me saying, and I lost my mind. I was like, I can't do this. This is gonna suck. Everyone's gonna listen to this and be like, what the hell, Shelley? What is wrong with your mouth? What is these words? And I'm probably doing it right now. I'm not even realizing how dry-mouthed I am. But I actually had to shut down my computer, and it sucked that I smoked a joint because I feel like I just ruined that high. And then I got so in my head that like everyone is gonna listen to this and be like, what is this? This is garbage. I also got really up in my head with our episode. Now I'm getting paranoid that my mouth is going to make noises, so I have to have water. I got really paranoid with our episode too, because I just was too worried about, is this too much information? Am I divulging too much about myself? Because our episode, I think by far is the most explicit.
Sure.
And maybe because I feel so comfortable. Like, I mean, this is a friendship that we've had for so many years. And like, I'm so fine talking to you about everything that I actually was just like, I don't know if I want people to hear you talk about my and this is I edited it out, but exit holes. And like, and my exit hole would never be my butt because I don't like it. My exit hole would be my mouth or in my vulva. Like, you know, it's just like I got so caught up that people would think too much about things. So there's that. There's getting out of my head, especially because I edit my own episodes. How much is too much editing? Am I being disingenuous if I cut some stuff out, or if I make myself, like if I trim people to eliminate some of the ums and the yas and the so's and whatever filler words that people use? It's that. And it's also learning how to craft together an episode.
Sure.
What was interesting, the episode that I did with Steven, the episode that I did with Blythe, I was really, really nervous for them. And I was struggling so much, especially Blythe's episode. I struggled because I didn't know what I wanted out of it. I didn't know where I would go. I was getting really caught up in my head. Like, I'm not really a producer that does these things. So this was just me learning how to put together a product that had a beginning, middle, and an end. I want to learn how to talk to people and make that all make sense.
Yeah.
But what if I don't know what the hell I want? Or like I have an idea, or I had two ideas. How do I put them together? And then we had a conversation, because I think after that episode I went to you and I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know. I feel like I messed up. I feel like I didn't do it well. And you gave me really good freaking advice, which was, you know, like when you're putting together an episode plan or guide, to think of it in themes, as opposed to like the questions that I'm going to ask and like where I'm going to go with it. Because, you know, obviously a conversation is organic, and what you want out of it is not necessarily what you're going to get out of it. And your advice to me on approaching it as themes on what I want to talk about, and then maybe like putting down talking points of what I would like, that changed everything.
Awesome.
And it helped me so much.
I'm not even a producer, bitch.
I know. You can now. That was game changing for me. It helped frame a lot of things better. And while I haven't necessarily, you know, Diana's conversation was completely theme based. I have an episode where I feature myself. That one is a little bit different, but yeah, kind of theme based with that one too. And that is how I'm approaching all the other ones. And it makes me feel more okay with it all.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great to hear. If I could just react to that. So like knowing you, and as our audience gets to know you as well, like you are very much critical of yourself, and you want to have a really, really polished product, which is, you know, faultless. Like, of course you want like a really good product. However, this is also an opportunity for you to craft and learn your art, right? And you can't have that on day one, right?
Yeah.
And even though like you've been at this for 6 months now, right? Like this is still the beginning of a very long process of learning how to develop something, right? So be kind to yourself.
I know.
Be kind to you know what? It's worth saying again. Be kind to yourself, Shelley.
That's so hard.
Right?
My therapist tells me that all the time.
Hey, man. Just pay me half what you're paying your therapist, and I'll tell it to you again, man. I got a mortgage. Interest rates are going up. What the fuck? Sorry.
Oh, God, I have a mortgage too.
Triggered. But sideline. Yeah. So like with that said, like you are doing what you are supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Both in failure and in success.
I have to remind myself of that, but thank you. It's really hard to actually do that as a perfectionist.
Yeah.
Oh, what a terrible thing. But yeah, I'm trying to take that constantly, and you do tell me that all the time. Yeah. And I have high standards for myself, so that's probably what it is too.
One more thing. So pulling from RuPaul's Drag Race again. So there was a recent episode that was just aired of Evie Oddly on the All-Star season talk about failure to success.
Yes.
She strongly encourages everyone to fuck up.
I agree with that.
Like you need to trip on yourself to know, oh, I'm not supposed to trip on that. I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah.
Right? So really cheesy acronym, so that I'd like to impart. Failure is an acronym for first attempt in learning. There it is.
Yeah.
First attempt in learning.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like it's gonna feel fucking hard and terrible, and
Yeah.
you want to just like impale yourself with how embarrassed you are with like the horrible thing. But one, it's not that bad, and two, take a deep breath, go masturbate, rub clits with someone.
Yes.
And then reflect. Okay, so I fucked up. What can I take? What can I take away from this?
Yeah, you're definitely right. It's one of those things where, actually, I think Jesse told me this. It's like it's a journey, and people are going with you on a journey, and you'll have ups and downs, and that's totally fine. And that was actually one of the best pieces of advice I could get. Is that sure, it's a journey, and I'm hoping that all the listeners are on that with me and can appreciate that, and then we just keep growing.
Awesome. Speaking of growing, can I ask you another question?
Of course
about your
you
growth?
can.
So your dad.
Yeah.
As we talked about before, it's really cool that you're able to like not only talk about sex with your dad, but have him on the pod. Has your dad listened to other episodes? Like, have things changed? Reactions?
So as cool as my dad is, he and my mom are still not well versed in the technological realm of things. So they've listened. My mom and my dad have both listened to my episode with my dad, but they haven't listened to anything else. They haven't listened to anything else yet. They just haven't had the time. They haven't gotten around to it. I hope that they do. But what was good? Did you have a follow-up question to that?
The reason I ask is because your dad is such a really interesting character where you had such a cool conversation. I'm just curious to know what he had to say afterwards.
Yeah, I think eventually I would like to find out, or I'd like him to listen to more and for that. But what I think ultimately I would like to do before the end of this season is to have him on with someone else. One of,
Maybe my dad.
That would just...
It would be disgusting.
I don't know how that would be.
No, my dad would probably get offended and throw a punch. Speaking of like fragile egos. And then your dad would take him out, because I'm sure your dad could take him out.
Yeah.
I love you, Dad.
Maybe. My dad told me today that he played golf. And this is going to fall on such deaf ears right now because none of us play golf, but my dad's glowing accomplishment today is going to the course, and he just broke 80 for the first time ever. I don't know what that means, but maybe someone will appreciate that. Does that make him stronger than everyone else? I don't know.
But
ultimately, where I wanted to go is I want my dad to be on an episode with someone who's queer. You, Diana, I don't know, and have a conversation to facilitate more.
Nice.
Where he actually has the ability to talk to someone else, not just his daughter.
Right.
But have me as a buffer. That is what I would like an episode to be at some point. Nice.
Okay, allow me to ask you one more question, and then I think that we need to move on to some other stuff.
Okay. Huh?
So, hi. So the second half of the podcast series, what do you hope to achieve? What do you hope to apply? What are your thoughts and dreams?
Oh, thoughts and dreams. I didn't realize I had those. I've learned a lot from the first couple of episodes. I've used my friends to talk about stuff that I talk about all these issues. Now it's starting to move towards people that are not necessarily my friends. So I would like to just build on this, like themes, and I have a better audio setup.
Yeah, you do.
Maybe I should start thinking about social media a little bit more. Like use all these things and find just as equally interesting and controversial topics to talk about.
Yeah.
Also, building on kind of responses that people have said, people have thrown out ideas. I've had conversations with people and I'm like, would you want to be a guest on my podcast? And they said yes. So it's just like, okay, now I want to put my thinking hat on, and how would I want to finish this season? So it's gonna be interesting. There's some cool people. Like, in my opinion, it's cool.
Well, listeners, it sounds like that you're in for a treat with Shelly D, motherfuckers.
I would like to thank you for tuning in today. Download, leave a review, follow, and share this episode and the podcast with your friends, family, really whomever you like. You can find me on Just Curiosity Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and you can email me at justcuriositypod@gmail.com, as I would absolutely love to know your thoughts, insights, comments, and all those juicy stories. But most of all, stay curious, friends. I'm Shelly D, and this has been Just Out of Curiosity.